I will say welcome, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that St. Mark's Cathedral acknowledges that we gather on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, who are still here, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the life of all the Coast Salish tribes. And I just want to say welcome to all of us and thank Richard for doing these monthly climate conversations. It's been great to be able to have small groups like this that can talk a little bit about different actions. And we do occasionally get new folks in, like Kendall today, and oftentimes it's from people outside of Seattle. So it's great to see some new faces. Thanks. And I'll turn it over to Richard.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's start with a prayer. God of all creation, your goodness and glory shine forth through everything you have made. Through the light of faith, help us to see this world, our common home, not as a resource to dominate and exploit, but as a gift to be cherished by all generations. Prompted by your Spirit, we ask this in the name of Jesus, through whom all creation was made. Amen. What we're going to be looking at tonight is, what we can do as individuals to try to have some influence on, what's happening with conservation, creation care, more through the political side or the nonprofit side, and sort of, why it's important, why it works, and options that we can look at within the broader area around more around Seattle, but also in the greater Seattle area. And so, we'll just sort of the usual format of, I've got some slides to go through, and hopefully they prompt some ideas, and we'll then pause for discussion, get people's thoughts on what we can do. And a little bit more about the second half will be more around specific options, sort of what we can do, who to contact, where to go, and then talk about sort of what we can do with those.
Yeah.
So, to start out, obviously, climate change gets lots of attention. This year, it's sort of been what's not going wrong, depending on where you are. It's been a bit warm in a number of places. Phoenix set records, and South Asia set records, and all over the place. Southern Europe, of course. Then in other places, there have been floods. And so you look at China, lots of floods in China. It's been sort of devastating. And then you've got droughts. The Mississippi River is having problems transporting grain because the river is so low, and the Danube in Europe has the same challenge. And we're fortunate we don't have hurricanes here. Southern U.S. has a lot of hurricanes going through. But we have wildfires. I just was doing some work on wildfires, and it was interesting because when there's a wildfire, the smoke reduces solar energy from solar panels by somewhere between 30 and 50%. So electricity production from solar just plummeted when they had the problems over there. So lots of things going on that seem like real challenges, and we have less of some of those big things, but we've got some issues as well. Air quality wasn't as bad as 2 or 3 years ago, but there were still a few days, especially in August, when we had some challenges and probably didn't want to spend too much outside. There's been a bit of a drought in some areas. I work with some farmers up in the Skagit Valley, and they tell me their strawberries are not doing well this year because it's been too dry, and other crops as well. It's been too dry. Water is the reverse side of drought. There's not enough water at this point. Trees, Seattle's trying to do a lot with trees and increase trees, but they just keep getting cut down, and the green canopy reduces a little bit. Wildlife is either threatened or doing well. We've got coyotes in our backyard, and they woke me up the other day because they were howling. So there are lots of wildlife in some places, but there are lots of threatened wildlife as well. Lots of waste. There's energy in buildings. And the study done for Seattle is that 60% of the city's greenhouse gases come from transport. It's cars driving, but it's also the e-commerce side, the logistics side, and everything else. Um, it seems pretty dire, but there's hope as well. And I want to focus more on the hope and what we can do amidst what is so often looked at as gloom and doom. And I'm very hopeful about the opportunities. And that's really our focus for today. If we look at sort of what we're told to do and the examples from the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, it's taking action. You go back to Genesis 41, and Joseph was collecting the food produced in 7 years of abundance. And then there was 7 years of famine. Egypt went through good times and bad times, and it was really preparing for it and doing something and being proactive. And in a way, it's a model for us today of, just what do we see happening? We need to be proactive also. Joseph had a little bit more influence than I do anyway, and then some of the rest of us. But made sure that the things happened. Proverbs speak up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. And so that's our responsibility for nature in particular, but also for other parts of our population who can't speak up for themselves as well, to speak up. And then, Timothy was charged with preaching the word, in season, out of season, and his role from Paul was building the church. And so it's another example of someone being charged to take action and doing a whole lot. Sometimes we think that one person doesn't make a difference, but one person makes a tremendous difference. When we try to do something for other people, and when we try to do something for the environment, those around us are more likely to help too. That's part of the reason we've started writing the stories, the stories page on the website, and asking people for stories. Because when others see what we're doing, it becomes an inspiration for them. And every time you change one person's world, there's a butterfly effect where it's going to change other people as well. And so if we think about this, who in your life had an influence on you? I can go back, and as a high school history teacher, tremendous influence on me. There's a professor in university, tremendous influence. There's one person in the bank, tremendous influence. A person in conservation. I've just got people right and left that I've gone back to thank some of them because they made such a difference. And you've probably got people like that in your life too. Maybe think about who you can share about later. But that's the kind of thing where what we do, what someone else has done has had a big influence on my life. What you do has a big influence on someone else. And again, going back to scripture, let your light shine before others. Let others see what you're doing. Go into all the world and preach the gospel. Tell people about creation. Tell them about creation care. It's our charge to go out and do things. There have been successes in Seattle, and just a few of them where individuals and then some groups are making a real difference, and it's individuals taking action. There was the celebrity cedar tree, Luma, that was going to be cut down. And I mean, how does a cedar tree get on the front page of the newspaper, or front page of so it's absolutely amazing. But individuals got together and took action and saved the tree. And they're doing that in other places as well. Some of green groups, and it's individuals leading the green groups, succeeded in reducing the fuel export along the Pacific coast. And so, where the refineries are, it's reduced tremendously. There's a person the links are in here so you can read some of the stories, but there's one person in South Seattle that is doing regenerative agriculture and restoring native oaks. Just said, that's what I want to do. And so he's taking action, becoming a model for other people. And so there are individuals around Seattle, even in the midst of all these things where you think, oh, doom and gloom, where we're making a difference and making change happen. And it's the individual saying, I'm going to take action to do something. And that's really what we can do also. Carolyn, you provided a little bit of input. So can I ask you about reflecting on your actions and some of the concepts that you put together? And you need to get off mute, Karen. Oh, you're still on mute. Sorry.
One of those basic steps. Well, I guess through some of the theology that I have studied, and through actions I have, I know that when people work together, there is an impact. And then when they think about it and talk about it with others, there is an additional impact. And so, of course, my memory is sort of sieve-like, I must confess, but I've heard of groups who have been, excuse me, working to 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 really affect improved housing, for example, for other people. And then they come together and they reflect on it, they read scripture about it, and then they go back out again. That's what is renewing. So when you talked about being proactive, Richard, I think the story of what I do, I mean, think back. How many of us have tried saying to somebody, oh, well, I do this, but, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the huge scene, but it does. And I'm repeating what Richard says. The more I do and then talk about, the more other people think, oh, I could try that. This is what happens in my friends groups. This is what happens when we come together in a ministry and we share what I'm trying to do, and then what happens as a result of that sharing. And all of these combined actions build, because that is the work of the Spirit. I believe really strongly that there is some element, some spark of the divine in me, in you, in everybody. And that spark of the divine then motivates us. And my spark connects with your spark, and so on, just like let's see, what is that? Basically down an atomic structure. My atom can be affected by the divided atom that came from my body. That's biology and way beyond me. But I just believe in that. That's the praxis. The word and world, the prayer, and what we do, and then how we are renewed, because it can be really demobilizing. Okay, Richard, I think I went on for longer than I should have, but that's really near and dear to my heart. And I might say also one other thing. We just read when I was at Holden Village, we read the story of Joseph and how he saved his brothers. But we also learn that the story of Joseph is the story of how we have been neighbors to other people throughout all of the Old Testament, and certainly what Jesus preached. Now I'm going to quit. Kendall could have done a much better job on that than I could have, than I did.
No. So, what can we do to sort of broaden our influence? Because like Carolyn said, talking to one person, becoming an example for one person is fantastic. And then we can do more than that as well, especially in the community. And then we'll go through some, political organizations, nonprofit organizations later. But we can participate in meetings. There are any number of meetings going on, consultations or council meetings or agency meetings that are happening. There are calls for consultation. So when some big projects are being done, there's often a request for citizen input, and we see that and say, oh, it doesn't matter. It does matter because it can influence the outcome. You can join a group, whether it's a nonprofit, or there was the group that was working on the oil, the fuel exports, and stop that. There are neighborhood groups, and we'll talk about some of those later, but you can join a group or you can do things individually. Meet council members or agency members. The city council members do hold meetings in neighborhoods around, and they publicize it, and you can show up and let your views be heard. And so that's another way to do it. Same thing with some of the agencies. So there's the climate change, or there's the state agencies. There are a number of others. You can write. If you don't want to show up, you don't want to talk, you can write. Just write online in response to that call for consultation. You can put together a petition and get lots and lots of signatures on it, and that can be an influence as well. You can also educate. I do some journalism, and one organization I'm in sort of does not look fondly on journalists advocating, which is a good thing. But I and others can write and to educate. So you can write articles, and there are any number of places you can publish it in newspapers or magazines or nonprofits or on your own on a Substack, or a number of organizations are looking for articles. You can write a letter to the editor, and that can be the Seattle Times. It can be smaller publications around. You can create podcasts or videos. My role model on this, and it doesn't relate to conservation necessarily, is that one of my friend's daughters was 17 a couple of years ago, and she got 7 million views on TikTok for something that she was cooking. And I look at it and say, okay, I'm not going to get 7 million views necessarily for what I do. But the podcasts or videos can have a lot bigger audience than we think, even if we just put them up ourselves. And so there are a lot of different ways that we can do things. And the reason to do it is that, and this is from the Anglican Church in the UK, but sharing our views is really an essential part of democracy. We've often lost that and said, oh, we'll just sit back and do nothing. But sharing our opinions, sharing our concerns is essential. And without that advocacy, our representatives are likely to get something wrong. And so just putting your views out there and explaining it gives them maybe a different viewpoint. It can make a real difference. And it's a vital source of how legislators, whether they're very local or statewide or national, can understand the impacts of what they're doing. You can join with others who care about the same issues. Kathy does a lot of things around the legislative sessions. And she puts a group together, or his ministry puts things together. So you can join with others and take action. And that constant being there makes a difference. There's really no bad time to write or phone or lobby your council member. They've always got things going on. It's just taking advantage of where they are and what they're asking for or where they're meeting and making your voice heard. So all of that makes a real difference. And speak up. Just talk about things you do. Make that normal. Take some risks. Stand out in front and talk about the path forward. And as Carolyn said again, tell other people, and it makes a difference. If you say what you believe in or what you're doing, other people will pay attention to that too. So let's pause and just ask for thoughts, reflections on people that have been influential in your life, actions you've taken, things you want to do, written, showed up, something else, or what you want to do. Thoughts?
Richard, I don't write my legislators often enough, but I do when I learn that there is something coming up, or even if it's not immediate, if I either go to that government number, either state or national, and at least leave a brief, succinct message, they record those. if I send an email, there's somebody there who has the unwelcome task, I would think, of recording the pros and the cons. And I think that's a way of building collective action.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Yeah, I see the request for consultation, request for input, and I think, oh yeah, somebody else is going to do that. Needs to be me.
But yeah, but it's important that I do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really possible to find a connection, for instance, Earth Ministry, or if you belong to a group that's encouraging advocacy, they make it so easy that you can actually do something. Without it, you don't have to learn, you don't have to research the whole issues or anything, because they help you with the language or set it up. So all you have to do is click something, and then you can vote yes or no on. I mean, it's amazing what helps are out there. Yeah, that I think it's really important to do that.
Nice.
So, Ruth, you've done your research on that through the years, and you now trust them.
I trust what?
And you trust Earth Ministry.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I mean,
some of us trust Earth Ministry and other sources, whatever they are, because they are credible resources to trust.
yeah, let me say something that the Earth Ministry staff has gotten really good feedback from legislators and whatnot
Exactly.
about the fact that they listen to the faith community. And when you join your voice with Earth Ministry, you are joining your voice with the faith community. And it really is listened to and has had surprising impact. And it's a statewide thing. It's not a Seattle thing. You know, it's to me, that's the only way to go, is to be part of a group that's doing it, as opposed to just, striking out on your own.
I would like to add, since we are entering into campaign season for city council that Richard talked about, and some, and then the federal elections, that we need to ask them about whatever is near and dear to our heart. And for us, I think it's climate change. So what do I want that person to implement? Or what did they already implement that I thought was valuable? So I want them to have to respond to a specific question, not just obfuscate it with a more general comment, because politicians, we all must admit, are pretty good at that.
Yeah, you can get a something that they've sent to everybody, but that's an interesting point. If you ask something specific, you're more likely to get a specific response.
I love Linda's flowers.
Yes, yes, indeed.
That's this year's flowers.
They are really nice this year. They're
And,
really nice most years, as far as I've seen. Yeah.
and Linda, there's a really rejuvenating effect from those natural plants. And then we can extend it into the trees that are still very prevalent in our Pacific Northwest.
I live on a ravine full of trees.
Nice.
I've had a great blue heron go
Oh.
in the trees.
Good. Okay, thanks for the input on it. What I wanted to do, and it's focusing much more on Seattle and King County, is look at where we can go and what we can do. Because sometimes we just think, oh, we'll read about the city council or something like that, and just let it pass by. But there's actually a fair amount going on in our area that we may not think about. So I want to go through these and just sort of talk about what we can do and where we can look at within that and what the opportunities are for input. So for King County, they have a climate action department. King County includes Metro Transit, and the number I showed before was over half of emissions in Seattle come from transportation. That's not just Metro Transit, it's all the delivery drivers and logistics drivers and cement truck drivers and everything else. But the Metropolitan King County Council meets on a lot of Tuesdays at 1:30 p.m. And you can let them know what you think. You can attend the meeting. You can write to them. You can connect in on Zoom. When I was looking at this a couple of weeks ago, they canceled some of the meetings, but they are meeting regularly. And so, it's really easy, whether you want to write to them, show up on Zoom, watch what they're doing, show up in person. You can do that. And you can sign up for the Climate Action News from King County. So there's an opportunity there to make your views known and reach out and potentially influence what is happening in King County. In Seattle, there is the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and that's doing a lot of the climate planning. So there is a climate plan for Seattle, and that's already come out. But there are committees, there are city council meetings, and you can do a written or verbal comment about agenda items. So, Carolyn mentioned just calling up and leaving a voicemail. That's possible to do. You can write to them. There's a land use committee that looks at what's being done with land in the Seattle area. So that's another one that you can take a look at. There's the Transportation and Utilities Committee, and that's covering energy. It's covering any number of things on transport, whether it's roads or parking or other aspects of transport. So that's one thing you can do. If there are environmental concerns, that could be trees being cut down, it could be pollution that you see, it could be different areas, you can report it. There's an area, a place near where I live called Piper Creek, and there was reporting on the pollution within it. And now there's much more of action that the city has taken to control, to educate people about not putting things down the drain that are dangerous, and taking care of Piper's Creek. And that can happen anywhere in the city. The candidate events are coming up. So I know there's one, I think I'm doing it virtually October 4th or 5th, but the candidates are going to be out there and they're giving talks. We can ask questions about climate change. We can ask about green jobs. We can ask about what the city is doing in particular areas that are of interest to us and that are in our legislative district. And it's the ideal time because you're going to have more influence now during the campaign and potentially more contact with the candidates than probably at any point during the next several years. I mean, you can show up for council meetings all the time, but in terms of sort of the direct, them being out, asking for input, listening to people, this is an ideal time with the elections coming up. So that's another way with the city of Seattle. The Port of Seattle actually does a lot of things. And they run the airports, they run the port, and those are big operations. And they have a lot of land around it as well. So you can watch the commission meetings and you can submit questions or comments to the port. So if you look at what's happening with airports and what are they doing around sustainable aviation fuel, for example, or what are they doing to make logistics for the ports better so that the ships don't have to sit out there with their engines running for 3 days before they can bring their cargo in. All kinds of different things. Seattle Airport has a report on what they're doing. They say they look at cleanup, climate, environment, habitat, natural resources. And if any of those are of interest, areas of interest, we can again provide comments or questions to the Port of Seattle Commission. And the links that I have here are the links where you can go to figure out how to watch a meeting or to submit your questions and comments, and also find out more about the Port of Seattle. So, we often just think, oh, Seattle Council runs everything. Well, the port runs an awful lot. I mean, our commerce goes in and out of there, and we're really dependent on international commerce. So they've got a big, big influence, and we can hopefully provide input to them. There's also a Puget Sound Regional Council, and I think Kathy has been familiar with this, but I've not been as familiar with it. But there are counties, cities, towns, ports, transportation agencies, tribal governments that are all, and so the members are like there's a county is a member, or a city is a member, or the tribe is a member, and there are obviously people behind that. And so they're looking at what policies are we going to have. They're looking at transportation growth and economic development. And as they look at growth, and then we just see more and more people moving in, we can have some input on it. You can get information as reports. You can join the mailing list. You should be able to provide input on it. But they're doing a lot on the policies for the whole region and coordinating for the whole region. So we can provide input to the regional council and follow what they're doing. And that can also help us just knowing what issues in Seattle are affecting other areas around the Seattle area. So it's another organization that we can take a look at and potentially do something with. Around the Seattle area, there are also the other cities. And so, if you live in one of those cities, you can do things as well. There is a King County Cities Climate Collaboration, K4C. And so that's one organization that is having the cities in the area collaborate a little bit on what they're doing on climate policy or climate regulation or other areas related to climate. So following that and figuring out how you may have some influence on it is an opportunity. And for each of these, similar to what looked at with the port or the city council and other organizations, there are opportunities to go to meetings, to write, to leave a voicemail, to talk to people. City of Bellevue has a community development department with environmental stewardship as its part of its action plan. They have a couple of town halls a year to engage the public on the plan. So anyone who lives in Bellevue can go to that. Kent has climate sustainability as part of the department. And so they're looking at a whole bunch of different areas around biodiversity, pollution, stormwater. So if you're in the Kent area, you can do that. And then each of the other municipalities around the Seattle area and in King County would have the same thing. And Tacoma would be, and Pierce County would be the same way, that there are similar organizations in the different county that would have opportunities for participating in what they're doing and providing input. There are a lot of different organizations that we can be part of too. So the individual action can be important. And being part of a group, as I mean, Ruth and Carolyn talked about earlier, can also sometimes be very effective. So I took a look around to figure out how many environmental organizations there are in the Seattle area. There are a lot of lists of organizations, and it's about 350 groups doing things. And this can be a very small group in a neighborhood. It can be a citywide group, it can be a larger group, but this is just in the Seattle area. I mean, some of them are branches of national organizations as well, but there are a lot of local organizations. And so if you're looking for which organizations to link up with, the links that are in here will have the lists that you can go into. So UW maintains it. Cause IQ puts lists together. And that'll give you some ideas of what to do. And I just listed a few here that are examples. So we talked about Earth Ministry earlier, and they're doing a lot, especially around the legislative side when the legislature's in session. But they're in between, they're letting people know about what bills are coming up or when to take action, what type of action to take, and how to do it. And they lay it out really, really well. Earth Core is looking at opportunities for taking care of the earth. Puget Soundkeeper focuses on the sound and more, whales and fish. There's a Green Seattle Partnership that's there. A friend in Ballard is part of Groundswell, and they're creating small parks. If there's like a strip of land between the sidewalk and the street, they're creating a park there. Or there's a roundabout, they create a park in the middle. Small in one sense, but large impact that makes the neighborhoods a better place. So getting involved with one of the environmental organizations can be a way to find common cause with people and just increase your impact even more. There are also neighborhood initiatives. So I live sort of a little north of Ballard. So I've got a friend who's on the Sustainable Ballard board. And a lot of what they're doing is more on the social side, but they also have the environmental side as part of their remit. So, they're trying to do environmental, economic, and community initiatives, build resilience, promote equity. And so they've got a number of activities going on. They've got some things going on around gardening, around people's homes. They've got education that's going on. They do any number of things. So I'm familiar with that one. Then I said, if there's one in Ballard, there must be something else somewhere in another neighborhood. It turns out lots of neighborhoods have sustainable somewhere. So Sustainable Capitol Hill. My son lives on Capitol Hill, and there's a Sustainable Capitol Hill. So they're looking at carbon neutrality, clean air, clean water, probably focused more on the environment than Ballard is. Ballard was more so on the social side, but still doing the environment. There's also Sustainable Seattle. And so there are initiatives, again, on environmental, economic, community benefits. And so there's the opportunity to do things for Seattle as a whole. So within your own neighborhood, wherever you are, or for Seattle as a whole, you can join with people in the community and do more for the environment for your particular area. St. Mark's has its initiatives going on as well. The Creation Care Ministry is a part of it, of course, but there is the mutual ministry goal, 2030 becoming carbon neutral. And so that is ramping up even more. We heard at our meeting earlier in the week that there are some specific initiatives to make sure that we meet the new rules coming in for buildings in Seattle. We're not the largest building or one of the really big buildings, but it's going to affect any building. And so we need to be ready for that, and that would be part of 2030. But there are a number of steps that St. Mark's is taking. And it's anywhere from replacing boilers to insulation to looking at solar and then the charging stations. So there's a lot going on with that. And within the diocese, there's a Creation Care Advisory Committee. There's a missioner for Creation Care. And so if we want to go beyond the Creation Care Ministry at St. Mark's, we could do things with the diocese. And other churches within the diocese are doing things as well. So potential cross-church collaboration in there. So there are a lot of different things that we can do, and we don't always think of it. So my reason for going through all these organizations was really to say it's easier than we think. There are a lot of organizations out there. we can participate, we can give input, we can collaborate with others, and make our voice heard. So, well, what I appreciate, we'll just break for input here. But are you involved with any organizations? Can you tell us about those, or are there ones that you want to work for and be a part of, or have you done things giving feedback to to one of the agencies or councils in Seattle or around Seattle? So, would love to hear input on what people have done, are doing, or are planning.
Well, I noticed one group that wasn't on your list. Of course, there's hundreds of groups, but Washington Conservation Action is a group that one of our members, Heather Millar, actually she works for them and she writes for them and is very active with them. And they're kind of a combination of environmental, indigenous rights, advocacy on the state level. So that's another good organization.
Nice. Yeah, they're I'm on their mail list. Man, do they ever get mailed out all the time? But it's good because they've got staff looking at what's going on and highlighting opportunities to provide input, and that's really valuable because you can see what you can do. Makes it easy. Thank you.
One thing I'm doing very soon is on October 1st at Town Hall from 6 to 8, there is the last stop of a campaign of Northwest tribes about drawing attention to the need to remove the four lower Snake River dams and the effect it's having a huge effect on salmon and the reservoirs that it's causing are making the water way too warm and it's one place my favorite way to advocate is to just go to things where you're in a march or you're showing up for. I mean, I love marches. I haven't been on one lately because I don't know if there was one recently, but I wasn't able to go to it, but having to do with the climate and all that. But there have been wonderful opportunities in the past, but of course, there's lots of other ways to do this. But it's a very inspiring way to feel like you really are a part of something that's bigger,
Fantastic.
Oh, and I'm collecting a group from Horizon House where I live. We can walk right over there. And so I'm pulling together a group from Horizon House to go over for that.
Well, that's really good. I forgot you were so close. That makes it really nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious that that's something we can do,
And I find too that, like I would never go on marches and stuff. I just kind of thought that's not really what I need to do. But I started going to marches after the 2016 election when I just felt like I had to do everything I could. And you go to one and then it's easier to go to another one and it's easier to go to a third one and a fourth one. It's like, okay, I grab my picket sign and put a new placard on it and out the door, and the same thing with commenting on state bills and stuff. Once Kathy kind of told us a link to go and I research a bill, and it's just so easy to do that. You do it once and then you realize how easy it is. So
Fantastic.
I obviously think that we are in a time for more concerted public action too. That's my vote. We need to get out there and publicly show that there are people who don't want to support fossil fuels, who are interested in saving trees. Oh, speaking of trees, Green Seattle Partnership is the organization that helps with providing resources and person power for caring for the ravine, which is right next to St. Mark's. And they keep a database sort of on the number of trees and are able to step in sometimes and advocate about the trees in our area.
Nice. Mentioning that, Carolyn, there's sort of two things I've got going on in the next month. One is that Seattle gives away trees to plant in your yard. And so I put my application in, and I've got 3 trees. I have to go through a training session on October 1. And then they're going to be how to grow a tree. And then I've got to plant them whenever they deliver it sometime in October. So if anyone wants to help plant trees, that's one way to do it. And then another one, I'm involved in Solar Washington, which is an education organization around solar power. And we've got a solar tour coming up 6th, 7th, 8th of October. And it just, put the word out there. People can stop by. A couple of us have got solar power and stop by, see how it works. We can talk to you about it, what we've done. And that's another way of sort of the individual. So it's not legislative. Both of those are more, well, the second one's more education side. Just saying if you educate people, more people can take action. And then the first one sort of plays off of what Carolyn said with making the city more green.
Richard, are you talking about you're doing this about your own house?
Yeah, so it's our house, and then Chris is doing one in another part of the region. Yeah.
And then how do you advertise that?
Solar. Let's see. The American Solar Energy Society has on its website, and they've got the contacts that it's getting out to, and it's on. So it's on social media. So it's tough to get people's attention. You're absolutely right, and most people don't know about it. But it's gradually getting out. It's the first time that Solar Washington has done this at all and be part of the National Solar Tour. So I think it's in every state or almost every state. There's a place you can go and just take a look.
Yeah, you should write a story on that one, about what it's like to be talking to somebody about your solar panels on your house.
I'll do the story after the 8th.
Yeah.
I would just like to remind people too about Project Drawdown.
Oh, wonderful.
That's a national resource. Actually, it's a world resource on understanding climate change and reducing our carbon emissions. But they really base their climate solutions on science, and they give us the data for why certain actions are really critical. And then they give us steps. So there are films and people resources that one can use to affect or I should say probably expand our impact of what we do. So project.drawdown.org.
They've got a 30-day action plan. I think it's next month. I sent it the flyer to Marjorie.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
I have a question.
Yes, Linda.
I've heard that solar rooftops for heat is not a good idea because we don't get enough sun in the winter to warm the houses. Is that true?
Nope. No. So you'll generate less power in the winter, more in the summer, but it still generates on cloudy days. It generates anytime the sun is in the sky, even behind the clouds, it generates solar power. It's just how much it generates.
So how do you keep your house warm if you have solar roof?
2 ways. One is that I'm still connected. We're still connected into the electricity grid. So at certain times of the year, I generate power and send it out. At other times, I bring power in, and at nighttime, I bring it in. And then we also have a battery.
Well, I'm natural gas.
Yeah.
So how does that work with it?
Well, you still use electricity,
I'm not in the city, I'm in Renton.
right? But if you put solar panels on your roof, you'll connect them to the electricity grid, and you'll either send extra power or you'll receive it when you're short.
Oh,
For
okay.
Renton too.
All right. The neighbor up the street has solar.
Yeah,
roof.
I can talk to you more about it if you're interested. Absolutely.
I think, Linda, a helpful thing might be to get some kind of a solar assessment.
Yep.
And there are, if you do a search on that, there are, groups that are not necessarily tied to selling it to you, but they can assess your property, the trees that are around, and can give you more information.
And
Yeah, 'cause I
Kendall's
have
involved in this, so
those
Kendall's gonna be more of an expert.
Oh,
Yeah. So I'm now bivocational priest in the diocese, where I actually
well,
I now
that's
make my livelihood with a boutique solar firm down in Soto, Solterra Solar, the only woman-owned solar company in the state, also. But but I'll be also providing, beginning in October, opportunities for actually solar information workshops around this, working with my parochial colleagues, providing information sessions to really demystify solar. I mean, Linda, your questions are very, very common. The clients have of mine, right? So, and Richard is totally right. These are all grid tied systems. So you've got the physical production of solar, right, on your roof, how that interacts with the grid physically, but then how you mitigate that with your power bill and that sort of thing. You're really displacing the amount of energy that any power provider needs to provide energy for you. And the thing is, it doesn't matter how your particular utility generates electricity. I mean, here in Tacoma, right, TPU is a very hydro heavy, as is SCL, a very hydro heavy utility, but no utility district, public or private, and you're in PSC in Renton, can produce enough power for their districts completely. So that a lot of what's with utilities, either again public or private, is in the trading of electricity, which means that we get electricity that is coal fired and nuclear, et cetera, from other parts of the grid. It's all tied together just to keep the. And so
Because I'm paying $320 a month for electricity and gas.
Yeah, right. And about
And I have 2 lights on in the house.
yeah, right. But I mean that all of that is tied together. And when you're producing solar, you're displacing that kind of production. And so this is, one of those things that I've been so tired of preaching about this for so long that I really wanted to do something really tangible. And it's hard to do that when you're tied Sunday by Sunday at the same place. God love I so enjoyed my 11-year stint at St. Matthew and Browns Point, but I just sort of felt like this was the time to maybe dabble a little bit before I go into my next sort of permanent call in a couple of years.
Wow, great.
Oh my goodness.
Let us know when the workshops are.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm developing that right now. I'll be actually at Convene, representing Solterra. I decided to go as a vendor rather than as doing a workshop just yet. I'll be kind of I'm in the process of kind of rebranding all my social media for my colleagues. I haven't evaporated. I'm still here, but this is what I'm doing. And but yeah, no, this is exciting work, exciting opportunities. So
Fantastic. We're sort of at the end of time, so I'm going to close this out, but I can stay around afterwards, and if you want to stay around and chat more, happy to do that. But I try to find some quotes that I like. And Fred Rogers, It's easy to say it's not my child, my community, my world, my problem. Then there are people who see the need and respond and get things done. Those people are my heroes. I really like that one. And that's sort of, I've got some heroes around that have actually done a whole bunch, and that's what we can do as well. So let's close with a short prayer. Lord, grant us the wisdom to care for the earth and till it. Help us to act now for the good of future generations and all your creatures. Help us to become instruments of a new creation, founded on the covenant of your love. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Richard.
I'm outside, so it probably isn't going to look